Okay, well, I'm going to start work on my next patient, so to speak, and I'm going to work on the chassis of the Grundig, or I should say Grundig 4090. Now, this chassis is so damn big and so damn heavy, I had to rig it on a temporary workbench made by this trestle work table. I also had to take care how to support it because the whole front plate is glass, and as you all know, glass is quite brittle and can break easily. So I had to cushion it with foam pads all around so as not to break any parts or anything. Also, you'll notice that there is the orientable ferrite antenna, and that sticks out of the chassis way further than anything else on the chassis. So, well, yeah, I use this trestle table to solve that problem too. So, what are we going to do? Well, the owner told me that he'd like to have his radio back in working order. Now, since we don't know exactly what went wrong with it, I have to replace for certain all the usual suspects. And, well, one of the usual suspects is obviously the electrolytic you see here, and I hope not, but maybe even the bridge rectifier. But like I said, I don't know yet, but as you all know, electrolytics are always prime suspects whenever a device like this doesn't work. I'll also change the obvious wrecked or broken or obviously worn paper caps, and there are quite a few. You see this one? Let me zoom in on it. So, hang on. Yeah, this electrolytic here, paper cap here, definitely needs changing. This electrolytic probably needs changing. That paper cap is oozing some type of stuff, so that probably needs changing or replacing. This electrolytic needs replacing. That paper cap definitely needs replacing. And then I will probably replace these blue caps here, this one and that one, as well as these blue caps here. So the big one here, and these 5 smaller ones. And hopefully any other electronic part inside the chassis will be fine. There might be the odd resistor that's broken, and that obviously I'll change too. I might even replace these 3 caps you see here, these paper caps. So this one and that one and this one. And that's it. Oh yeah, there's another one here. Okay, so I'll change these paper caps and the 1, 2, 3 electrolytics and these caps here, these blue ones. Normally, aside from the old resistor that might be broken and eventually, or maybe the rectifier bridge inside this can, if I repair all those parts and clean up the buttons and variable capacitor and any other moving parts, then I think there's a good chance the radio will work as it was intended to work. That is, obviously, if no tube is broken. So we'll have to test the tubes too, at least for emissions. So we'll see. So let me start by unmounting the electrolytic can here and replace the electrolytics that were inside with new ones. Alright, I'm gearing up to undo the electrolytic can of the Grundig. And as you can see, the electrolytic can is held in place with 3 tabs which have been bent over. Now, unfortunately for me, to undo the last tab, I need to unsolder it because apparently they use it as a sort of a grounding. So that will complicate things a little bit. As far as I can make out when I read the schematic, the electrolytic can contains 2 100 microfarad capacitors, as you can see right there. So undoing the capacitor can and replacing the capacitors shouldn't pose too much of a problem. Once the capacitor can is undone, I'll have a look how hard it would be to gut it and place the new capacitors inside. If it's too complicated, then I'll mount the capacitors somehow on the outside. But in my opinion, in order to keep the authenticity of the circuitry intact, I'll make at least an attempt to place the new capacitors inside the can. And this is the electrolytic can when it's completely gutted. As you can see, there was a very fat roll of I would say electrolytic solution soaked paper and aluminum paper. I'm not going to unroll it, it's way too dirty and probably not very healthy. Now to get to it, I had to uncrimp the edge, as you can see, of the electrolytic can. Then I had to take out this ring. Actually it fell out, so that was easy. Then on top of this, of the contacts, was placed a rubber ring, a sealing ring, this one. Then I found the contact, let's say lid of the electrolytic can. As you see, there's still a little bit of the electrolytic solution on its contacts, so it's still a little bit wet. And then underneath that there was another sealant ring, this one, which still has a little bit of a contact left, which was the mass. So that ring actually connected the mass or the negative of the capacitor to the outside of the can. And then you had the capacitor itself, this one, and you can see the stick poking out of it. I used a small wooden stick to poke through the vent which was built on top, built-in on top of the electrolytic can. Now normally the vent is a closed piece of rubber, and probably its strength is calculated in such a way that should the capacitor fail, dramatically fail, the vent, or rather the rubber, would tear and the gases would be allowed to flow out through a hole there. but I use it to poke out the old capacitor. And as you can see, the can is still a little bit dirty, but I'll clean it out, and I think I have plenty of space to put in the new electrolytics inside, so that should pose no problem. Okay, so I cleaned out the can of the electrolytic capacitors, which I use to filter out the B plus voltage. As you can read, it contains two 100 microfarad 350 volt capacitors, or rather it contained them, because as you know, I removed them. Now I'm going to replace the capacitors by one capacitor of 100 microfarad 400 volts and two capacitors of 47 microfarad 400 volts, which will make them together 94 microfarads, which is still well within tolerance limits. There are no tolerances mentioned, but I use a tolerance of 10%, which is usual for these kind of parts. So that's what I'm going to do now. Then afterwards, what I'm going to do is to replace the electrolytics, the one you see here, and the other one you see here. Since the weather is fine outside, I thought I would take the opportunity to clean the Grundig 4090's cabinet. And as you can see in sunlight, the wood has certain stains and spots. It also has been damaged slightly along its edges. But the owner of this radio told me that instead of a complete makeover of the case, he wanted just a simple cleanup of the case and its trimmings, which you see here at the front of the radio. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a thorough but nonetheless basic cleaning, and then I'll even give it and then I'll give it a simple waxing, I think, just to protect the wood a little bit. But aside from cleaning it up and giving it a slight waxing, that's the only thing I'll do to this case. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, obviously I won't be able to take out the scratches from the wood, nor the little pittings like here. But what I can do is give the existing lacquer, or rather take off the existing lacquer with a little bit of acetone and give the wood a good scrubbing with a mild abrasive. And then when that is done, I'll give it a waxing, which should bring back some of its structure and some of its wooden gloss back. Obviously the waxing won't last forever. After a few months it will need a new waxing, but that's entirely up to the owner, of course. And actually, to give it a permanent gloss like some parts still have, it would need a thorough cleaning, in-depth cleaning, and then a lacquer layer. But since the owner decided against it, what we'll do is give it a thorough cleaning on the outside, and then a waxing, and that's it. Notice that I unmounted the glass front panel of the radio before I started working on it. The reason is actually quite simple. The front plate is the face of the radio. If it gets damaged in any sort of way, cracked or broken or even discolored or anything, then, well, the radio loses quite a bit of its appeal. So I unmounted it. Unfortunately, I did notice that somewhere in the past, I think when it was built in the factory, they put some sticky tape on certain parts of the glass plate. Why, I don't know, although I suspect it was to protect the glass from the clamps with which it is held in on the chassis. Unfortunately, the sticky tape has the nasty habit of aging over the years, and when it does, it also pulls away pieces of paint. Because this glass plate has been painted, back painted, and as you can see, well, these are the traces of the original painter, the one who painted the glass plate, and he was clearly not too conscientious about handling the plate, since he knew this part would be hidden behind the cabinet. As you can see here, this is part of the cabinet here. Also here, the sticky tape let go and took away part of the paint, unfortunately. So I'll have to find a way to glue it back without damaging the rest of the paint, and hiding most of the damage. Perhaps in the future, if the owner decides that the radio should get a complete makeover, I can find a way to repair the gold paint or the bronze colored paint which was used to paint this glass plate. Well, in any case, we'll see in the future. So temporarily, I'll just have to fix this sticky tape. Okay, so some interesting and noteworthy details of the radio. You'll notice that at the top of the radio there's this whitish wire running in a zigzag along the top of the cabinet. Now this wire is also connected to this piece of double-stranded wire, and I suspect it was originally the FM antenna. Now it was, when I got the radio, it was like this, so it got obviously disconnected by somebody, and I suspect the reason was that the FM reception probably didn't work in the radio, and so they decided to disconnect the FM wire. Also remember, the radio was slightly modified by somebody to be used as a sort of an amplifier or maybe a PA installation, and obviously they didn't need FM reception for that anymore, so they simply went and disconnected the FM antenna. Also, notice that most boards on the inside are attached with small clamps and screws. Notice how the panels on the inside are attached with little clamps and screws, like the ones you see over there. Let me zoom in a little bit. So you see here, these clamps hold in the wooden boards, and well, I should say the wooden boards where the speakers are attached to. All around, you see, they made ample use of those clamps. Now normally, if I would be giving this radio a complete workover, I would of course undo those clamps and take out the boards with the speakers. But since the owner said that he only wanted a cursory cleaning, I'm not going to do that, obviously. Also notice that the plastic covers on the front are also attached with little screws, wood screws I should say. Now another detail that I noticed was these rubber feet on which the chassis rests. Now it turns out these rubber feet let go of the wood, and apparently a long time ago, I suspect in the factory, they were glued to the wooden bottom board. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, unless of course I manage to find rubbers which are more or less the same, but I doubt it. Anyway, you can notice that these rubbers have become flattened over the years by the weight of the chassis resting on it. So normally they should be, let's say, a centimeter high, and now they are only at the thinnest point perhaps 3 millimeters thick, which still works but is not ideal. So I might have a look tomorrow at the local DIY shop and see if I can get some rubbers which are the normal thickness. Actually I said 1 centimeter, but that's not it. I think the maximum thickness is about 5 millimeters, not 1 centimeter. Anyway, I need to find new ones if I am to replace these, and I don't know if I can find any. Now you might argue, what's the point of changing these rubbers if I'm not going to give the radio as a whole a complete makeover? Well, you know, the chassis rests on these rubbers, and if the chassis drops too low, the shafts of the potentiometers and any possible other shafts and or buttons will drop too low into the cabinet, and that might hamper the good working of the chassis. So it's not entirely stupid really to change those rubbers. I think some of you call these rubbers grommets. So, well, like I said, I'm going to look for new ones if I find any. Now I gave not only the wood a cleaning, a thorough cleaning, I also gave the brass trimmings a cleaning with a polishing compound like this, which is a local polishing metal polishing compound, and it works rather well. Okay, granted, to give it a really thorough cleaning, I should be taking off these trimmings, I suppose, and then clean them over and then give them perhaps a protective layer of special metal lacquer, but I'm not going to do that, again, for the same reason that the owner did not ask for a complete makeover. I did bring out the logo, as you can see. It used to be almost black like this, but I polished the letters so that they would stand out a little bit better, since this is part of the face of the radio after all. Now, I didn't go really hard on them because I wanted to keep a little bit of the original patina on those metal letters. I did the same for this logo, which says it's a hi-fi radio, Sauberklang. And Sauberklang means in German pure sound. Yeah. So in its day, this radio must have been top of the line. Anyway, this is the cleaning. I'm going to end up giving the radio one last pass with a clean rag to give it a really clean surface. And then once I did that, I will give it a waxing so that at least the wood is protected for a while at least. And there you go, completely cleaned and waxed. As you can see, the wood has somehow, well, somewhat, its shine it would have if I would redo it completely by giving it a fresh coating of lacquer and all that. But as it turns out, the waxing did a reasonable good job. Granted, it will last only a few months or so, and then the waxing will start to fade again. So by then the radio will need a new waxing normally to keep the wood nourished and from bleaching. Obviously, for making this video I displayed the radio in full sunlight, but if you want to keep your cabinet looking fresh and new, especially after having recoated it with whatever, with wax or with lacquer, you should never keep it in the full sunlight, because that obviously will hasten the bleaching of the wood. So that's it for cleaning. There's one more detail I want to tell you, and that's that I used wax of the brand Buffalo. Yep. As you can see, the brand of the wax is Buffalo, and I found it on eBay, and it's from a Portuguese company. They have it in 3 varieties: clear, which is the one I used, medium and dark. So, and it's the cheapest one I found, but it turns out to smell really good and to do a really nice job of waxing. So cheap is not always synonym to bad. In this case at least it isn't. And you get a decent quantity. I think you get 250 ml, which is not bad for its price. Anyway, look it up on the net if you're interested. So that's it for now. I'll be making another update for when I finish changing the capacitors, and then I'll put this video online for you guys.